Welcome to my channel, and hello. The most elegant tales of betrayal and retaliation are showcased. My self-centered views caused me to make a dreadful mistake that ultimately cost me the one man I've ever loved. The thought of causing him pain appalls me. Even more devastating is realizing that he is no longer with us. I had assumed that we could work together to correct my errors. I chose to sacrifice my loving buddy and lover for pointless flings with random men. Henry, my future husband, and I met in the library when I was 20. He handed me a book off the highest shelf. We exchanged numbers and struck up a conversation. Henry was not a very handsome person, but he had a fascinating charisma. Our friendship developed quickly into love. He represented the beginning of everything for me. First kiss, date, love, and private encounter. I wasn't the first for him. He had a lot more experience than me, which made me feel unworthy. I was happy when he proposed, but I was also terrified that I had made the wrong decision in choosing a life partner. I had no one with whom to contrast Henry. In order to gain experience before our wedding and convince myself that he was the one, I suggested an open relationship at that point. Henry was enraged. He declared that he saw me as his future wife and did not want to share me. His comments affected me so much that I opted to marry him instead of considering an open relationship for a while. Our wedding was small, yet elegant. Family and friends in attendance. It was a happy first year of marriage. Then the persistent anxieties came back. I worried that getting married would mean less exciting, private moments for me. Whereas my friends could talk freely about tales of their multiple affairs, I had nothing to say, so I made the decision to talk to Henry about it. At first, I cautiously suggested an open relationship, but his response made it clear that moving forward would put me at risk of losing him. I asked him if he would mind if I added some spice to our lives in bed. His forthright, unrepentant response enraged me. He would leave right away. Because he had dated other women before me, I felt that he was setting unreasonable boundaries. Why am I unable to follow suit? When I brought it up again a few months later, I got the same harsh response. I'll admit that marrying him while still having affections for other guys was self-serving. I was thinking about how foolish it was to attempt to keep Henry's love alive. I hate myself now for having betrayed the most significant person in my life. Giving in to temptation. Our primal desires are always fueled by something. Mark was his name. Built like a bodybuilder, his muscles bulged out of his tight attire, making him a monstrous guy. Commanded women's attention with the ease of a confident, swaggering alpha man. Mark became my immediate supervisor after being relocated to my department. That required them to have private daily briefings. He was around 30 years older than my spouse and me. He spoke softly and with a flirty demeanor, as though he were constantly luring me in. It was hard not to get thrilled around him and act professionally. Mark asked me out for drinks after work one evening. My ears did not seem real to me. Or was he simply being polite? My mind raced, but I was unable to turn him down. We went to a pub by the office, and I had too much to drink. We started joking around, going from business to personal. I said that I wanted to be more than just a man's wife. I talked about everything, including my desire for him and the idea of an open marriage, which permits intimate freedom without shame. He asked me if I had discussed this with my husband. Yes, I replied, but he objected and said he would leave if I carried through. Mark then advised me to show my spouse that it was a done deal and not to ask for approval. He suggested that I dissolve my union in order to pursue this without Henry's consent. Mark was the picture of poor judgment. Claiming it was for her advantage, the suitor gave bad advice. I know now that all he wanted was to spend the night with me, but at the time I was searching for an explanation for my craving. Mark took me to a hotel that evening and made me feel like the universe's queen. I knew that Henry was the reason I felt that way every day, but when it came from someone else, I felt like a happy teenager once more. My spouse was dozing off on the couch when I got home from work, as though he was expecting me. I sneaked into the restroom to remove the lingering smell of alcohol and unfamiliar closeness. I looked up at Henry and said I wanted to talk about something. When he replied that he had important and very happy news to share, I got the chance to speak first. As he listened intently, a joyful smile flashed across his face, then vanished in an instant. However, since I knew I was doing morally, I didn't give a damn. I just said that I would like his support and wanted to get out with other men. I wanted other guys to think of me as divine, the way Henry did with other women. If not, I couldn't be content with the only person who has ever loved me. What shit I spat upon. Those words stayed in my thoughts. filling my eyes with tears every time I thought of that particular instant. Stupid I was. He looked at me for a long moment, then bowed his head in surrender. He remained silent for what felt like an hour before saying, "Well, if that's how you feel, then fine by me." He got up and left without sharing his happy news with anyone. I leaped joyously into my boss's embrace the following day. On his desk we had an intimate moment, and it was just getting started. Although it wasn't my last relationship, Mark was my first after Henry. I started going out to their favorite pub on Fridays with my coworkers, and sometimes on Saturdays I would wake up in the arms of a stranger I had never seen before. I felt my devoted Henry had come to terms with the fact that I had turned into a wanton prostitute. I went on to sleep with different men almost every day after that. But 2 months later, I was confronted with the reality. On a Friday morning, while I was getting ready for work, Mark came to pick me up because I thought my husband had left already, as usual. Henry was still at home, but before I left for work, I thought we would have a little intimacy. When my husband opened the door, he saw Mark standing there holding flowers. Their conversation was drowned out by the sounds of the shower. They were chatting happily, as if nothing had changed when I left. Henry just smiled or frowned, never expressing any emotion at all, not even anger, hurt, disappointment, or despair. Therefore, I genuinely believed that he was cool with our open marriage. I had no notion that I was creating my own downfall. With my naive, immature mindset, Mark made fun of my spouse's adeptness at adjusting to the idea of an open relationship while driving to work. It was a Friday. Mark and I had gotten a room with a view of the brilliant Cape that was panoramic. That night, we experienced deep intimacy. I knew as soon as I got home on Saturday that something was not right. My husband was remarkably calm, and I didn't work weekends very often. His favorite tunes were blasting over the speakers all the time. He wasn't on the treadmill like he usually is on Saturday mornings when I peeked inside our home gym. I headed to the kitchen, figuring he would at least make coffee the way he always did. I spotted my favorite mug on the counter. I smiled, happy to find traces of our common history. I was excited to take a taste when I took up the cup, but it was empty. There was a letter and an envelope inside. I've retained the exact words, though I can't remember what they were today, as a somber reminder of allowing a wonderful marriage to fall apart for a few brief affairs. I feel so bad about myself. My greatest regret is losing Henry. Even though I've done a lot of horrible things, the message said that Henry had traveled to Canada for a month-long work vacation. When he got back, he was going to file for divorce. He felt bad about wasting so much of our time together and getting married to me. There was a passport and flight ticket in my name next to it. The ticket included an announcement on the back that said, "Recall the news I told you about 2 months ago? It's right here." My company was willing to pay for our lodging while we were in Canada. They also extended a job offer to you. His marriage band was positioned at the base of the cup. My whole world crumbled before my very eyes. I was devoid of food and liquids and felt depressed for the remainder of the day as I stared at that mug. My life became more and more miserable, and I became very depressed. As if by coincidence, Henry's closest friend showed up the following day to remove everything he owned. As he and other movers stole almost everything that belonged to my spouse, I sobbed hysterically. Henry's friend called me a whore and shot me a glare. His remarks hurt back then, but now that my spouse has left, my house has felt gloomy and empty, though they hurt even more. I tried to distract myself, going from bed to bed and affair to affair, to lessen the hurt of losing my sweetie. Less than a week after everything happened, Mark submitted a transfer request. He told me straight out that he was moving on now that the fun was done when I asked why, saying that I thought we were starting something. I was extremely duped, and my new boss disliked me right away. My career suffered greatly as a result of my intense personal turmoil. Not long after, I was fired for yet another error. My friends and parents abandoned me. They were all aware of my hedonistic tendencies thanks to Henry's acquaintance, and they had no desire to associate with a prostitute who had left her husband for another man. In a very short time, I lost everyone I held dear. When Henry got back from his trip a month later, we started the divorce process. I begged him repeatedly to pay attention and let me explain. I even suggested that we attend marital therapy, but he refused to entertain me in the slightest. By the time our legal breakup came, I had lost our cozy home, the support of my amazing spouse, and the one person who actually looked out for me. I hate myself still for ruining everything. How do you interpret this? Tell me in the comments section below, please. Thank you for coming today. In order to make sure your next chef stays faithful, Subscribe to our channel. Await the following story with interest. When you consider what's to come, it's nothing. But I strongly warn, avoiding listening to the next story if you're younger than 18.